Good afternoon. Welcome to the latest edition in our series lessons in online are brought to you by education. My name is Robert Lynn, Associate Director at SEEC and the moderator of today's session, Leadership Lessons from a Canadian Fashion Icon and Entrepreneur. Our guest is Linda Lundström, one of the most respected principal Therma Kota, a direct-to-consumer outerwear concept she co-founded in 2017 with her daughters. Linda will be joined by her co-founders, her daughters Moshe and Sophie this afternoon. We are delighted they just joined us now. Linda is also the recipient of numerous awards, including 3 honorary doctorates. She was named to the Order of Ontario in 1995 and awarded the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012. Her career spans more than 40 years as an acclaimed designer, award-winning entrepreneur, social activist, and professional speaker. Linda will be interviewed by my colleague, Alan Middleton, SEEC's Executive Director. If you'd like to ask questions during this session, please feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to ask as many of your questions as time permits. We are also recording this fireside chat for those who are unable to attend today's live session. Now, let's get started. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Robert. We're really lucky today as the visuals come on, because we not only have a family business founded by Linda a while ago, but her 2 daughters are coming in. One from Ireland, which is Sophie, and one from California, which is Moshe.
Hi.
So we've got the whole successful kit and caboodle today. It's wonderful. So we're going to talk about 3 or 4 things today, about how to build a business, but also with an angle on how much ahead of time Linda and her daughters have been, not only in the fashion world, but working in a diverse and inclusionary environment as much as possible, working as management at distance, and also staying ahead of trends in delivery and also personalization. So, Linda, tell us a little bit about the founding, but as part of that, tell us a little bit about your time getting involved and engaging with Indigenous groups and how you've conceived that in your fashions.
Wow. Well, I was born in a little town called Cochiner, Ontario, which is in northwestern Ontario. It's near a bigger place called Red Lake. And it was all gold mines up there. And Cochiner was a little town of 250 people that was built around a gold mine. Yeah. And when the immigrants that all went up to that area to work in the mines arrived, there were, the Indigenous people who had lived there for thousands of years on their ancestral land were there. So about 75% of the surrounding population were Indigenous. But Alan, we went through school not learning anything about who they were, their culture. Yep. We learned American history and Canadian history post-contact. And I was always very curious about these people. And I have to admit that it was a racist community, even though we were in the minority. It was racist against the Indigenous people. There were injustices, brutality, all kinds of things that were perpetrated, sometimes by the police, against the Indigenous people. So this whole murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls has been happening for a long time, and it was happening when I lived up there. So I went, when I had Moshe, my first child, who you see here, when I had Moshe, I looked down at this baby and I said, I cannot allow the racism that I grew up with, and trust me, I was part of it. And I'm ashamed to say that, but you learn from the people that you admire and look up to, like your father. My father was a racist. The community there was racism in the church, in the school, and so on. And so when I saw my baby and how innocent she was, I made a commitment that I was going to unlearn the racism that I'd been brought up with, and that I was going to make sure that it didn't get passed on to the next generation. And that began my journey to basically try and make amends for, you know, the sins of my father and the sins of my community in terms of racism. And it, Moshe's 33 now, so I've been on this journey for 33 years.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you build that thinking into some of your early designs and the setup of the business, and how you've taken the business subsequently?
Well, you know, guilt is a tremendous motivator.
Yeah.
And a very dear friend of mine, Karen Dannenman, who is a trapper and a Native woman, I said to her, you know, my motivation is my guilt. And she said, we don't care what your motivation is. It could be,
Just do something.
It doesn't matter. Just do
Yeah.
something. Just keep doing things. And so motivated originally by guilt, and then motivated by the richness that the people that I was listening to that were guiding me on this journey, the richness that it brought to my life. It just became a calling.
Yeah.
And so how did I incorporate that into my business? Well, I'm a fashion designer. I don't know, you know, like, how do I do that? So what I did was I reached out to John Kimbell, who had started a foundation called the Canadian Native Art Foundation. And he connected me to every band office in Canada. And I invited Native artists to submit work to be embellished on my La Parka, which was a product that I started making in 1986, the same year Moshe was born. Boy, a lot happened that year.
Yeah, no kidding.
It was really a cathartic year. And I began to invite Indigenous people to submit their art to me. And I chose some winners. I paid them for the use of their art. And one of them was a boy I went to school with in Koshiner, Abius Kakapetum. And I ended up using some of his work. So it kind of brought everything full circle in that whole healing process. And it introduced me to these incredible Indigenous people, and gave me a chance to finally satisfy the curiosity that I'd had about these people growing up.
You and I, when we were chatting about this before, said, you know, one of the things we must do is we must listen and learn from these groups. And the extra element is, you know, we can't put ourselves in their position because we come from a certain angle. But by doing that, we can understand better as long as we listen and pay attention.
Right. And I mean,
a lot of what you did is about that.
Yeah. And I made a lot of missteps on the way. I did. And, you know, I had that typical white attitude as I'm going to fix this. And I had to really just learn to just shut up and listen. Yeah. And that was hard for me because I'm a take the bull by the horns kind of person, but it was a very, very important part of the journey. And so as a result, today I've got, you know, I have many, many, many connections in the Indigenous community. I've reconnected some of the people I grew up with.
Good.
And today with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, I'm really relieved, because I always said I want to see this discrimination against people of color and Indigenous people and marginalized. I want to see it go away in a lifetime, and I felt like I was running out of time. So this movement has been extremely painful, but also encouraging to me to see such strides being made in such a short amount of time.
And it won't go away, but hopefully we're on a slightly more accelerated path.
Yeah, and there's lots of things that we can do as individuals to keep that momentum going, you know, in our lives, in our businesses, and in our perspectives.
Absolutely. Now, tell us about the second coming, if I can call it that, when you came back with your daughters and have founded a new enterprise. So tell us a little bit about that enterprise, and both Moshe and Sophie join in if you think your mum's still trying to tell you how to do things.
Well, actually, it was Moshe's idea, the beginning.
Ah.
Yeah, Moshe had been, well, you tell the story, Moshe.
Yeah, I guess in 2016 is when we really started to talk about it. And I was just living in New York City, traveling a lot for work, and had a real need and desire for the type of outerwear that I wasn't really finding in the market, that could withstand the elements, but that also was versatile enough for our really busy lifestyles. And especially living in New York, your days are so jam-packed from the moment you leave the door. And just realizing how important outerwear is, what an important role it plays in our closet in terms of kind of being the first and the last thing people see you in, and how much of a majority of the time of year in many parts of the world people do rely on outerwear. And I was just really missing some of the key principles that my mother always wove into her work with her Lundström brand, like the uniqueness and the versatility, the quality, the high performance. Being a fashion editor, I knew everything that was on the market, and I knew that there was a gap there. So.
Now, how did you get to set up? Because there's a big change between, with forgiveness, writing as a fashion editor about it, and then taking the risk to actually go and do it. How did that come about?
Well, I was licking my wounds from having, in 2008, at the very beginning of the world financial crisis, my bank called my loan and gave me 30 days to pay back $2 million. And I decided at that point that I'd had it. I just didn't want to do it anymore and know that somebody in an office on Bay Street could just basically shut my whole company down. So I was forced into bankruptcy, and so I did a bunch of other things for about a 3-year period, or 4-year, actually it was a number of years. As I said, licking my wounds and really grieving the loss of my company, which was this fabulous award-winning company and was no more. And so when Moshe came to me and said, Mom, there's a white space in the market and I think we can fill it, I was ready at that point. And I said, okay, but having had all those years of manufacturing wholesale and retail stores of our own behind me, I said, I knew what I didn't want it to be. I said, I don't want to do wholesale. I don't want to do big, huge collections that we have to, make a year in advance. And so we basically started out with what we wanted, the white space we wanted to fill, and what we didn't want the business model to be.
And we didn't want to do parkas like everyone else was doing.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't want outerwear that made you look. Yeah, we didn't want to look like you were on a North Pole expedition, which is
the beauty of. And then, sorry, I just wanted to say the beauty of my mom's work was that La Parka came in all these colors, and it was like a signature style, but it felt so unique. And I think what we started to see in the outerwear market is people just wearing the same coat
with all the same badges on them as well.
And you go to the coat check and you feel badly for the
which one's mine?
All the same.
Yeah, so the germ of the idea started that way, and then we said, well, what about Sophie? I mean, Sophie's going to be so important to this because my darling Sophie is extremely talented and award-winning graphic artist, visual communications graduate from Emily Carr in Vancouver. And so the three of us together have very different skills.
Now, where were your daughters then? Because one of the things that you're making work is Ireland to California to Ontario. So Sophie, where were you when this all started?
Where was I?
We're on a beach somewhere.
New York?
Think
I was
Asia?
Living a nomadic lifestyle at the time. So I was, from the get-go, we were working remotely. We meet all together a couple times a year, and we just make it work. Yeah, like I said, from the get-go, through FaceTime, through, we're so used to this situation that we're in right now, which is just like talking to our computers and and video chats and texting back and forth all the time. So we just we didn't really have to make the adjustment like a lot of people have, businesses have been doing lately with working remotely, but we've just we're kind of used to that.
Tell us a little about how you guys make that work.
Sophie was sort of
You're absolutely right. The rest of the world is beginning to learn how to do it now. You had a bit of an advantage because you're related, so you know each other.
Right.
But it's obviously much more than that. How do you make this work?
Can I say something? At one point, Sophie was sort of on her honeymoon, and she would say, "Okay, I'm on a beach in Thailand, and I'm not reachable tomorrow because we're flying to Japan."
Right.
And so she was a nomad, and she just stayed in Airbnbs that had Wi-Fi. So we never knew where she could be on a beach. Moshe was living in New York, and then Long Island, and then Miami, and now California. I was the one that was staying put here in our home in Caledon, where I have my studio. So we really took advantage of the free FaceTime Hangouts platforms, and it just seemed really natural.
Yeah, there's so much technology out there, so I guess we've just really embraced it.
Yeah, and I think Mom has been the type of person, like, even though, you know, we're from different generations, she's always really leaned into like new technology and always wants to learn about what's new and how we can harness that for like the better of our business. So I really admire that about her, and it's made this system of working remotely work for us. And there's kind of just like a handover with the various time zones, but it's been nice because we all live in different places. Therma Kota isn't just a business, it's also like symbolizes a family bond for us, and it's kept us really connected and close.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the business and how you see it evolving, and how do you manage things like actually getting the clothing actually produced all online?
Well, the production really starts here in my studio.
Okay.
I personally do all the cutting. I started my company in 1974 in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I did all the cutting, and I did all the patterns. And you know, it's like my life has come full circle. And I'm making patterns, and I do all the cutting, because I really believe that if a garment is properly cut, then it can be properly sewn. I use contractors to do the production sewing, and then the garments come back here for inspection, and they get sent out in various ways. Now, yesterday we had about 15 of our aprons to send out. We're doing a fundraiser for the Canadian Native Center in Toronto, and we're giving them, yes, and we're giving 15% of the sales of, well, you can't see it that well, but I'm wearing the apron. It's on our Therma.
I love it. We get a fashion show as well. I love it.
Yeah, and we're also making them for men. And 15% of the sales go to the Native Center in Toronto, and they deliver meals and services to at-risk Indigenous people through this pandemic. Now, yesterday we had about 15 of these aprons to ship out. Sophie was in Ireland. She was generating the FedEx shipping labels to put on the boxes. I was inspecting each apron before it went out, and we ended up working together for a couple of hours, Sophie and I, getting all the shipping done.
Yeah, like we all kind of have our own piece of the pie.
Okay.
I guess, and it wouldn't really work without all of us coming together, and we kind of have to, you know, wear a few different hats and maybe do some things that are a little bit outside of you know, our expertise, just to like fill in those gaps. But yeah, so like the samples and the production happens in Canada. Moshe handles all the PR, the communications, like anything that's written on the website. She's an amazing copywriter. And also just like, I think because she had that initial vision, like, and is really on the pulse of trends in fashion, will kind of lead the way of, okay, what should we be doing next type of thing. And then I kind of like, you know, run the website and do the visual aspect of presenting, but you know, what you see is kind of, I'm able to do that. So
now I have a bit of a sneaky question, because Linda and I have talked before about that she doesn't necessarily want to build a big company. How do you two feel about it? So what's the future of this organization? Is it going to be highly personal? Is it engaging you totally? How are you sort of planning your futures together?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, Alan. And I think it's been, interesting to just have this business evolve in a way. And I think, as my mom always says, like, everything is a gift, everything happens for a reason. There's definitely been points, especially right out of the gate, where I just wanted the business to like skyrocket immediately. And I'm actually really glad that we've had a slow and steady and manageable and organic trajectory, because for a number of reasons. One, we've been able to build incredible loyalty with our customers. We're not selling, mass-produced cheap garments. We're selling highly personal, primarily made-to-order things, and customer acquisition and loyalty is so important to us. And we have customers that are Linda loyalists that came to us from my mom's previous brand. So there's that piece. Also, as we were talking about, we were already equipped to be dealing and working remotely when the pandemic hit. And then third of all, because we rely on a network of some really talented contractors, we don't have like large staff or overhead. We're able to be like super resourceful and scrappy and allocate our funds in the best way possible and pivot really quickly and change if we need to. We're not shackled by our business model. And I think it's actually quite freeing. I have a lot of friends in the fashion industry who are hit so hard by the pandemic, when they're relying so heavily on wholesale distribution. And we just weren't. And the fact of the matter is, our sales have been really strong, especially because of the apron. And our community really cares about social causes and was very adamant about supporting our Capes for Heroes initiative, where we gave capes to healthcare and essential workers, and also the give back component of the apron. So it's been like kind of happy accidents, I would say, along the way, that I think have indicated to us that we're actually on the right path. And I think if you lead with your gut instinct and with authenticity, that the lesson for me is that's often the result.
And it sounds like one of the things, you've all got to be passionately involved in the product itself. You want to be proud of it. I'm hearing that from all of you, that you want to be proud of what you do and the way it comes out. Let me throw a bit of an odd question, maybe not, because Canada's had some very strong entrepreneurs in this area. I'm thinking Lululemon. And Lululemon went with the yoga craze and grew like crazy, and then said, oh, we've overexpanded. We went beyond our philosophy and now bringing it back a little. Is this going to be a temptation for you guys? Because you're being so successful at this. Sophie, let me throw that one at you.
Oh, okay. I'll just say a quick thing and then you can add to it, Mom. But I guess it's just, it's just a mentality of we started slow as well. Like we just launched with one product, and that was based on a lot of things of just like wanting to test out the market, limited resources. We just were like, let's put one thing out there that we feel really good about and see what happens. That did really well. And then we added shearling into the mix. So it's just, I don't know, like I prefer to just grow in an organic way than like rapid growth. I think that that's a little bit, I think like my sister was saying, a lot of people want that, but I think all of us would rather it be a slower, steadier growth.
I just wanted to bring back something that I learned from my friend Brenda Zimmerman, who's a professor at York University. Back in December, if you had said to companies, your 5-year plan, your 3-year plan, your 1-year plan, your 3-month plan is not worth the paper it's printed on, that the future is unknown and unknowable, And nothing is going to be the same come March, December, January, February, March.
Yeah.
This is the world we live in. Being nimble, being flexible, being able to perceive what's going on and what people need and what people long for and what's important in their hearts and in their souls. So, you know, when the whole pandemic hit, we started saying, we just stopped our regular plan, which we were planning on going to Iceland to do a photo shoot. Everything just stopped, and we pivoted and we said, okay, let's do something for frontline workers. In fact, we didn't even know how we were going to pay for it. We just had the intention, and we wanted to recognize them. We started asking for nominations, and we were flooded with nominations, and we said, oh, this is going to cost us money. Well, then people wanted to contribute, and we realized that we're operating almost like a social enterprise right now, where we are making products that enable us to give back and to help marginalized people. And what we've discovered in the process is that it's feeding our souls.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it might not be showing up in terms of bottom line profit, but in terms of goodwill and feeling like we're doing something, it's priceless.
Yep. I'm getting a chat a question here. Can you expect? Whoops, I just lost it. Excuse me. I'm technologically incompetent, unlike the young women I've got in front of me. Can you expand on launching with one product? We're often bound by the idea of launching with a full collection. Is there a minimum with how many styles from a smaller connection? And this is from a young lady called Juliet Zhang.
Moshe will take that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think there's lots of companies that are kind of taking this approach right now. First of all, when you say bound, that word, so many brands end up being imprisoned by their inventory. And that's the worst kind of position to be in as a company, where you're literally trying to push and force inventory on your customers or anyone. People can smell it from a mile away when, you've got excess inventory and are trying to clear it out, versus the model that we really adopt is, it's all about urgency and scarcity. You have to order in advance. Oftentimes it's made to order. And I think, if you sort of train your customers of a new way of thinking about shopping, it becomes quite a seductive proposition. You feel like you're getting something special that not everyone has. And I think also too, as a creative person, and you can speak to this too, Mom, when you're focusing on less styles, it gives you more time to really refine them, and then B, to make sure that they're, checking all the boxes and are as maximized as possible. So the customer's really getting a lot more of a return on their investment, if you will.
Yeah. In my former career with my company, Linda Lundström Inc., which was we were bound by the calendar of the fashion industry. I was designing 800 to 1,000 styles a year. In Therma Kota, I'm designing maybe 20 a year. And the very first style that we did, which we launched one garment, we basically said, well, what does it have to have going for it? Well, we decided it should be reversible, so that it's two coats in one. So that if Moshe's on the road and she's attending these fashion shows in Milan and Paris and New York and all that, she can turn her coat around and make it look like a different garment. There should be some aspect to it that is wind water repellent, and a styling details that make it sort of transformable, so that you could change the look of it with the belt, without the belt. So we decided what the design elements were going to be, and then we put those into the first style, and then we had a story to tell.
Yeah,
and you learn with each style, and we continue with the styles that work, and we drop out the styles that don't. We've had some styles that have been really successful, but from a production standpoint, they ended up being a pain in the neck. They weren't bringing us joy to make, or they were, you know, in the end, the margins weren't shaking out the way we would like. So, you know, we get rid of them, and we are continually refining. And also just trying to offer our customers, making people feel included in the brand by offering our approach to size inclusivity, which includes a made to measure option with many of our coats. Which I think removed a big barrier of entry for a lot of customers shopping online, which is guessing their size or even not knowing if we had something that would fit them. You know, the plus size market is really underserved. And
so a big part of our process is to get a person's measurements, especially for our shearling, which is, you know, it's a costly investment, and but very high value. And so we get people to give us their measurements, and I custom cut each shearling order according to those measurements. And that's been a very, very popular, I would say probably 80 or 90% of our shearling orders are custom.
Yeah, we had Fortune magazine wrote a wonderful article about us last year, just talking about how also low our return rates are because of the fact that we do this custom program, because the wrong size is one of the main reasons why people return. And I think it's also really healthy for women to divorce themselves from these numerical size categories and instead focus on their specific measurements, the same way a man might with like his shirt, neck size, like length, that kind of thing.
We're coming to the end of the half hour. In fact, we're slightly over, Galton. We'll keep going. But I've got a great question here from Alex Kwok. Hi, Linda. This is Alex Kwok. I was a student of both Alan and Brenda Zimmerman. Not sure if you remember me. I worked for you briefly in the late 90s. I remember being at a large celebration of your company. I'm glad that you are designing again and started a business. I fully agree we need to be flexible, especially in this unusual time. I just looked up the aprons on the website and I love them.
Thank you, Anna.
So 2 questions. One question from Nano Han. What do you think of 3D technology in the fashion industry, like virtual fitting, 3D designing, virtual garments, and so on? Interesting question. Now, if you want to duck that one, I can move on to another, but fascinating question.
No, I'm, as you know, I've always embraced technology. I was one of the first companies, even though I was very small, to bring in a CAD/CAM system for all our patterns to be digitized, everything like that, and ended up having all computerized CAD/CAM system in my company. So I embrace technology. However, this 3D technology works if you're making kind of static garments that are more rigid or fabric. The kind of styles that I make don't really lend themselves to that technology, only because the styles that I make have, you know, have drape, have fullness to them, and it's just it's a different way of looking at it. I am interested in 3D technology, however, because I think that has the potential to map a person's exact dimensions, exact measurements, and make a 3D model of them, and then to be able to reproduce that 3D model on a printer, 3D printer, or maybe even on a 5-axis machine to actually create it in real life, so that I could have an exact replica of Oprah Winfrey's body, for example, and I could custom make things on her. So there is potential to 3D technology. I don't see its application other than the one I just mentioned in our business, but I can see that especially if companies are making a lot of things offshore, which again is, you know, that's all up.
Absolutely.
That's being questioned right now. So I would tread very carefully in that area, but I think there's something there that it needs to be. It's like any technology. You need to adapt it to your particular individual needs and even customize it to your needs.
Couple of comments before we go to the last question. There's a massive move for onshoring, as it's called now, simply because of supply chains have got spread out. And I'm looking at Sophie because we're seeing this in the UK and Ireland as more organizations are bringing manufacturing back online to their domestic market. Because not only of the distance.
Alan, I've been saying this for like 4 decades. Why are we making things in other countries? If we can't make it here, we shouldn't be making it.
There you go.
So I've always been very, very adamant and sometimes criticized for it. When everybody was going to China and everybody was going offshore, I insisted on making everything here and became very competitive using lean manufacturing processes. And I think using lean manufacturing processes, we can manufacture in this country beautiful products with high value and sell them to our domestic market.
Absolutely.
And you see, the thing is, when everything started going offshore, all the fabric textile mills disappeared in Canada. We had textile mills here, but we don't anymore.
Yeah.
So
the Quebec-Ontario border was full of them. Yeah.
Exactly, woolen mills and all kinds of things. And we basically, pissed that away. I'm sorry, pardon my language.
That's okay.
We don't have it anymore, and rebuilding it is gonna be difficult. But I still feel very, very adamant that none of my products will ever be made offshore.
Okay.
Oh, we're
last
committed
question.
to that.
Sorry,
Alan,
last question.
Alan, we have time if you don't want to rush. If you want to go on a little longer, we can.
The little bit, yeah. Kelly Dowd has got a great question. You all seem, so this is to all three of you, to have been able to find growth personally and career-wise through not being afraid to take risks. Do you have any advice on how not to let fear hold us back? Sophie, I'm going to pick on you first.
I
for
was
this
thinking,
one.
oh God, no, I do that though. I do. I'm sometimes very risk adverse and do.
So are you the risk caution in the team?
Yeah. Oh,
okay,
totally.
that's interesting.
Yeah. Like, and I think just like recognizing when something is fear-based, to kind of just look into that a little bit more of like, okay, what is the worst thing that could happen? And actually see that through, like really think about it. And sometimes there's really nothing that bad that can happen by trying something. And so, yeah, that's something that I still am working on. But it's like, it also sometimes it's like, because there's 3 of us, we just do a simple voting system. Sometimes we're just like 2 out of 3, yes, we're gonna do it. If not, or like best scenario, we're all on board with something. But yeah, I think just having that like voting system helps as well to make decisions and to just like go for things,
Sophie manages our cash flow.
Right. Okay.
And so Sophie is often the one that's going. Sophie's often the one that goes, we can't afford that.
Yeah. Okay.
And, she's the voice of reason. And
So what's your voice, Linda?
In terms of taking risks?
Yeah.
Taking risks?
Okay.
Well, I have really strong gut instincts. And I'm right 50% of the time. And that's not good enough to be right 50% of the, but I'm naturally a risk taker. I love buying lots of fabric, and I love spending lots of money, and I love taking risks. But I also like it when Sophie and Moshe say, "Yeah, Mom, it's a great idea, but we're not going to do it." I'm like, "Oh, okay, fine. I got lots more ideas because only 50% of them are worth pursuing." So I need both Moshe and Sophie to kind of audit my lack of fear of, and one of the speeches that I give is called the F word, and it's all about how to handle failure. And failure being the F word. And I think that exercising your failure muscle is a really, really, really important part of running
And
a
learning
business.
from it.
Yes.
Exactly.
You should be
Continuous.
failing on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moshe,
We're all
what's
about,
your
like-
role in the triumvirate?
I'm definitely more like my mom, like a risk taker,
Yeah.
but I also feel like maybe I'm I'm very somewhat strategy minded. So I don't know, but I love the question, Kelly, because I do think for so many of us, it's like we want to try something and we are afraid. And I do think that can be, that can really hold you back. I don't know. I think what works about us here is that there's so much support. And I think if you can find a company culture where even if you're not related to the people, you do feel like you are able to try something or have an idea, or go for something, even if, and, you know, if it doesn't go exactly according to plan, that, you know, that'll be okay, is a great place to operate from, because it, you know, as creative people, if you're too fearful, and I mean, I've certainly been in organizations where there was a lot of fear, it can really hinder your creative process.
Yeah. We always say like continuous improvement.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's just all about continuous improvement as like as a mantra that we all.
But the other thing, and I am going to have to close it off, the other thing that I'm getting from you, and I will hand it back to Linda for the last comments, the other thing I'm getting from you is something that we know from studies of family business, which is the importance of understanding within the family the different strengths and weaknesses and listening to them. And you three seem to really have that down, you know, just the way you talk. Because a lot of the generational stuff and a lot of the stuff across family businesses, they can't find a way of listening to an alternative viewpoint and taking that into the decision making. So I think that's a very important learning from you guys. Linda, last comments. Anything you want to tell us? But at minimum, because I'm an old salesman myself, make sure you tell us your website.
Oh, yes. Okay. If anything we have said makes any sense to you at all, go to Therma Kota, ThermaKota.com. You'll see the aprons, you'll see the outerwear that we have for sale. And I also, for my public speaking, it's lindalundström.ca. Okay. So I want to just say that there are times when we do step on each other's toes, and we do have disagreements, and we do make mistakes. And it's accepting that happens. I think we can probably equally divide up the mistakes that we've made and take responsibility for them. And bottom line is, somebody screws up, the other two of us back them up. And you know, there have been some pretty fierce conversations. I'm not going to lie. But we managed to get through. And the other thing that we spoke about in this conversation, Alan, that I feel really, really strongly about is this whole Black Lives Matter movement that's happening at the same time as this worldwide pandemic. Like, what are the chances? And I think that every person, company, and individual is being given an opportunity here to have time to reflect on whether or not there are any biases that exist in your own heart. You may say, I'm not prejudiced, I treat everybody equally. Well, you know, make sure and make sure that you have it, that you are open to having your company or the company you work for, if it's your own company, audited for systemic equality. That
Beautiful.
systemic equality be built into every organization, every part of our culture. And it's not the privileged white people that should be deciding. It should be the people of color, the indigenous people, the queer people, the gay and lesbian people, the two-spirited people who should be auditing companies and educational curriculums to make sure that they are designed and organized to reflect equality.
100%. Thank you all three. Don't go away. I'm going to hand back to Robert and Gautam, who are going to close it off. But we're going to say thank you. But on the way there, Robert, you're back in. Thank you to the three of you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Robert.
Thank you to everyone for attending today's session. Please feel free to join us at our next Fireside Chat, The Heart of Resilient Leadership, The Future of Work is Human, on June 24th at 11 a.m. with Zabeen Herji, Executive Advisor on the Future of Work at Deloitte. A special thank you today to Linda, Moshe, and Sophie. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Good luck
Thank
in the
you.
business, everyone. Thank you.
So much, Robert.
Take care.
Thank you.